and kind of go in that order below my name on the slide and introduce yourself and what your role is. That'd be great.
All right, this is Yuan, Director for Development Services and also the building official. I'm glad that several of you can join us and forego a lovely day outside because it's really looking good outside my window.
Is Adam on the call?
Thanks, it's Adam. I'm not sure if he has voice connection. Sometimes it does not have it. So let's skip the link and Adam can jump back in when he is on.
Michaeline?
I don't see Mike on here either, so we'll go to Sandy.
Okay.
I'm here. I did not get the invite to be outside today, I guess. Sandy Stillman, lead engineer, development services. I oversee the IDP review process, easements and things like that.
I think I saw Ashley on the call.
I'm here. Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. So I'm Ashley Cheney, Development Services Liaison.
Dana Box. I'm zoning plans examiner for the city.
Hello, I'm Dustin Wright. My title is a code compliance coordinator, and I oversee the review for water sewer drainage for building permits and sign permits, and also water tap permits.
Saw Jeff on the call.
Yes.
Jeff is with us. Jeff, unmute.
I just did. My name is Jeff Taylor. I'm a plans examiner for City of Tulsa. I primarily do zoning and architectural reviews.
My name is Danny Whiteman, and I'm also a plans examiner with the city, and I primarily do residential building reviews.
Okay, so thank you all. We have a good group from Development Services today. I'm going to go ahead and next slide. The agenda today, we're going through that now, the welcome and introductions. Believe Ewan is going to provide an overview of the discussions. We're going to talk about the permitting side as well as the IDP side today. And I'll let them talk about that when we get there. And so these are the people that did, that confirmed that they would attend today. So if you could even go down the list and even talk about, you know, what you represent, your firm, another firm, whoever's interest, as well as how you interact with the permit office, that would be really helpful. So starting with Ross Heyman.
This is Carly Weiner from Capital Homes and Charney Properties. I think it's just me from our team today. But we are working on a ton of different things in the Tulsa market for redevelopment and also ground up development, and just excited to keep learning about what the city of Tulsa is doing.
Is Rick Stuber on the call? Brad Jacobs? Jeff Hall? Joe Westerfeld? Bruce Bosley? We're not doing good in the first column. We have one so far. Elliot Nelson or Casey? I know Casey's on.
Yeah, I'm here. Elliot wasn't able to join us, so I'm here with that hat on and my TDA hat on.
Okay. Stephen Watts? Josh Miller? Josh Kunkel, I saw him on the call.
Yep, I'm here. Josh Kunkel, managing principal for Method Group, and we focus on urban infill projects.
Okay, Weldon, are you on the call?
No, Weldon was not able to be on the call. This is Meenakshi Krishnaswamy on behalf of W Design. I am the Commercial Department Director for W Design, and we deal with City of Tulsa development services, building permit, planning and zoning, and INCOG, and every aspect of commercial development.
Okay, Stuart Vanderwilly? I don't think I saw Stuart on the call. No. Molly Jones? I think I saw that she couldn't come. I got it in email earlier. Arturo Saldivar? Stuart McDaniel, I know I saw you on the call.
Hey, Stuart McDaniel, Guru Stu, working on infill projects in the Crutchfield neighborhood.
Philip Conley? Nathan Cross, are you on the call? Blake Boswell? And I know I saw Tim Beckman.
Yeah, I'm Tim Beckman. I'm president of CJC Architects, long-term firm here in Tulsa.
I saw Sean Schaefer.
Hi, Susan. Sean Schaefer with the OU Urban Design Studio. And excuse me, I'm just here to learn what I can so I can impart knowledge to our students.
Very good, thanks. Jonathan Belsley. John Droz.
This is John Droz. I'm with Synergy. We do a ton with the IDP department and as well as the building department for building permits.
Okay, Stacy Bell, she said she'd be kind of in and out, so I'm not sure if she's on right at the moment.
I am Susan, and I'm going to just take Sean's lead and say we're doing the same to impart to our members so that they can be better professional residential builders. Thank you.
So Jeff, is Jeff on the call?
No, Jeff is tied up with number as we're preparing for budget next year. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. Anyone else that that isn't on this list that is on the call? If you would introduce yourself, we'd like that. Okay.
Hi, Susan. This is Natalie Cornett with Eller and Dietrich.
Hey, Natalie.
Hey.
So anybody else other than Natalie? I'm just looking down the list real quick. Okay, well, next slide, please. And so just as a reminder as to really what initially started the need for these meetings and these discussions with you all, we are updating Planet Tulsa, which is, of course, the city's comprehensive plan. A large focus of our work on Planet Tulsa, obviously, is infill development and even just improving our development review processes, both at the planning office and development services. Specifically, we think this information that you're helping us gather or provide to us is going to inform both what we're calling the housing and neighborhoods chapters, as well as the land use chapter. And also, this will also help us implement the downtown and surrounding neighborhoods strategies that we're working on as far as missing middle development, infill development. There's zoning code amendments to help implement that. So that was more of a focus on the first one, but I think really all of these discussions will help us identify what those barriers are to infill development, specifically in the last discussion and this one on our processes. And if there's anything in those that are difficult that we need to try to find solutions to help facilitate. So I think at this point, I turn it over to Ewan, I believe.
Sorry, I gotta unmute myself over there. Before I jump into this slide here, just by way of recapping a little bit from Roundtable number 2, I think Bruce Bowsley has a question about why is it that staff at Development Services seem to know a little bit more about zoning code than staff at Tulsa Planning Office. And So I kind of talked about the different roles that our two groups have, but I would be remiss today if I didn't say that our colleagues, our counterparts over at Tulsa Planning Office are they're quite knowledgeable about the zoning code. So I just want to make sure that I say that today. So then, roundtable number 3 is about working with development services. And again, we're trying to examine the processes that you have experienced from your side. On our side, we think or we believe that we know the processes because obviously we have tried to put all these workflows together to help you with your development projects, but we are not engaged from the other side. So I think it would be very helpful to kind of get some of the comments from you all. Over the years, we have developers from out of town. It might be a small project, like maybe a Slim Chicken going up here in Tulsa. And, just as much, we hear them say, it's a lot easier to get permits from you than over at Broken Arrow or Owasso and so on. But it does not tell us much as far as where we are doing well and where we are not. At the same time, we have heard over the years, many local developers who say, it is so much easier to get a permit in Jinx, for example, or Broken Arrow. And again, we just didn't have enough time to kind of get into the meat of the matter and discuss and find out how we can improve processes. So that was not too beneficial, but I'm glad that today we can kind of sit around here in this virtual room. And so one of the questions that we have here is what kind of development processes or projects that you have experienced, which was easier to get through in the suburban communities around Tulsa. So you can raise your hand and ask a question, or as you move along, just kind of give us some comments and feedback. I want to highlight that we are interested in the two different aspects of it. The processes, sometimes it is not, the challenges they have may not be driven by the type of project they have. It might be just a process that is involved in getting your project off the ground. And so I like to find out what sort of processes that we have that somebody else did not have, or they might have a different way to deal with the process. Or sometimes it might be a project that we have just beyond imagination just made it more difficult for that kind of project. So let us know. And the second question over here is, what would you change in our processes to make it more similar to your experiences in other cities? So this question there was trying to focus our mind on what processes might need changing, or what project type that you can look further and make it an easier process for you. So specific to the process here, what kind of changes can we tweak? And again, you are engaging in a process from the other side. And we are on this other side, we don't have the same experiences that you do. Today, we have a varied group. We have attorneys, we have design professionals, we have developers and so on. And your engagement in the process might be limited. And I'm saying that from the standpoint that you may be engaged in an upfront discussion, and then you kind of leave it to your design professional to kind of move the project through the rest of the steps. And so at that point, you rely on your consultants to give you reports on how things are moving. So we have different experiences in the whole process. But if you can kind of like think about from start to finish, would you recommend a total change in the process that we have that deals with a specific discipline or aspect of your development, or maybe a few changes in there that makes it easier? A total process change would more than likely involve some ordinance change. It is more in policy, so I just want you to kind of keep that in mind as well. I have said that some out-of-town developers have come in here and compared us nationally. They have also made some comments about the differences getting permits from City of Tulsa as opposed to getting a permit from Broken Arrow or Owasso or Jinx. So we have all kinds of different things, but whether local or national, I think I'm more interested in your experiences. What city is easy to work with? And because we're all just nearby here, not more than 20 miles apart, it is very easy for us to drive to their office and say, hey, look, I heard that your process for this development is a lot easier than what we are doing. Can we talk about it? Can we learn from you? Can we make some changes to what we can do? So share some of your experiences with us. And then if you can kind of talk to us about your specific experience with development services. And with that, I want to include the last bullet point here. What are some of the difficulties that you have encountered more often when working with development services? And I say that from the perspective of, I may be working on a specific development project, but I have a unique challenge on that project or on that site. And so we went through some processes to get it working. So that is kind of like just a one-off issue. But if you have engaged in 4 or 5, and it seems like every time you came to a certain aspect of the development, you almost always encounter some difficulties in the process. Those are some of those perhaps embedded challenges in the process that I like to know about, beyond just something which is specific to a project. For example, if a project is on some sort of sacred site, that is what I meant being something which is specific to a project. It's not going to happen with every project that you engage in. But if there's something else that has to do with maybe just getting an earth change and the different difficulties that you go through getting the earth change, I would like to know what we can do with the process to make it easier for you. So if you can give us some of these examples in the chat or raise your hand and ask questions, let us go through the questions as we run through this program. So with that, Travis, you can go to the next slide. I think Ashley is going to talk to you about some changes that were put in place and hopefully to make life a little bit easier for your development. So
I think John Droz, he had his hand up.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to give my overview of those questions if this is appropriate time.
Sure.
First, I want to just say, congratulations to everybody at the city. The building permit process in the last couple of years has come exponentially miles. So it's been impressive. The review times have been extremely reasonable, and I just want to say awesome job to everybody who helped implement the quicker turnarounds on the building permit reviews. And we've just recently experienced the same thing we submitted a earth change permit for a large development. It used to follow a much longer timeline. Now it goes through the electronic system. We actually received comments back in 2 days on the earth change permit. So that was awesome. The one thing we do run into in development with the city of Tulsa is during the IDP review, we've done a substantial amount of large projects, and I would consider that anything over 20 acres that includes some heavy infrastructure. So we've done a lot of those projects in the last couple of years, and I think the hardest thing for us is twofold. One, let me say this: water review is very streamlined. Sanitary review, very streamlined. Road infrastructure review, very streamlined. We are really struggling to see some consistency in stormwater review. We've done, I think, 5 separate drainage reports for a couple projects, and if you put them side by side, you would say, well, these aren't for the same jurisdiction. These are all different. But in fact, a couple of them are for the same projects. So I would say that the consistency from a drainage review aspect has been extremely lacking. And also the one thing, if I had one thing I could change about how we review plans versus how cities around us and across the nation review plans, when you send in a review to X jurisdiction and you get comments back and you reply to those comments, as long as you cover the comments that you received and you respond to those 10, 20, 200, whatever that number is, comments, and those are taken care of, the plans are then done. It seems at times in the city of Tulsa, we receive plans, we receive comments back, and it's like the plans were completely re-reviewed. Like we took care of the comments that we were given, and then oh, by the way, here's a whole nother set of comments that we didn't get the first time. So when that happens 2 or 3 times, you start to wonder, like, what is the process? Like everywhere else, and I haven't worked everywhere. Everywhere else that I've worked, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, all the big Texas cities, East Coast, West Coast cities, everywhere that I've been a part of development. Once you address the first round of comments, then it's done. But we tend to see a complete re-review of the plans on the second and third submittal. So that would be the one thing, if we could get changed, would be awesome. Other than that, I mean, like I said, the headway we've made in the last couple of years has been amazing. I know some of the larger projects, the guys have come in from places and have just said, this is an amazing experience. This was awesome from a building permit standpoint. And then they get confused when we're in a 4th review for an IDP and we get a comment about, we don't like this hatch pattern. And they're like, what the heck is this? And so other than those kind of lagging comments, we have come a long, long way. And now that I've talked for way too long, I'll go ahead and shut up. Thank you.
John, appreciate your comments, came from your heart. We are going to be talking about stormwater side of it, and Sandy Silman can respond to that if you don't mind. But you have touched on the points that I was trying to drive at exactly. It is recurring issues, a project. It's not something that might be unique to a project. And again, I appreciate your comments on the general improvement that we have tried to implement over the last few years. So it is gratifying to hear that there is positive results, but we can always continue to improve. We don't sleep. Hopefully you realize that by now. And we'll continue to improve that process. But thank you for the comment. Josh, did you have something that you want to share with us? Josh Kunkel.
Sure. Yes. That kind of continual or rolling review is the exact same experience on building permit. But I would like to mention in Oklahoma City, this was back when, and I will also echo the comment that the review times have quickened quite a bit. But back whenever it was longer review period, we had a 5-story rehabilitation project go through in Oklahoma City in less than 10 days to getting a permit issued. And in Tulsa, at the same time that we submitted, we had a 1,500 square foot TI that took 3 months to get reviewed. And so, and we submitted on the same day. So again, there's been significant improvements on Tulsa's side, but the way that they run their permits is they review, here's their comments, and they will issue the permit. And as long as those comments are addressed by the time you go get your CO, you're good. So that alleviated a lot of burden off of their office.
Okay, thanks, Josh. I might want to try and get back with you offline to discuss the 1,500 square feet TI and find out exactly what happened there. Kind of like doing some sort of forensics on that.
Sure.
Okay. So my name's Ashley Cheney. I'm the Development Services Liaison with the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. And I'm just going to touch on some of the recent efficiencies made by development services. The first is the hiring of additional staff. So in 2018, we were able to hire additional plans examiners. We were able to fill some vacancies, including a few management positions. I know IDP had a management position that was filled, but in hiring the additional plans examiners in particular has allowed us to not only process more applications, but we've been able to turn them around more quickly. So we're very grateful to have been able to do that. Another efficiency is going to be the self-certification program, or the implementation of that self-certification program. And this program allows the developer to contract with an outside firm to provide their plan review services. And so the idea is that the firm will certify that the plans are compliant. And on the basis of that certification, the city is able to issue the permit. Really neat little program. I don't think we've had a whole lot of participation in that, but I'm hoping that that will change. Another efficiency is going to be our additional review services with FSCI. And this is, or FSCI is a firm out of Chicago who provides plan review services on behalf of the city. And again, they pretty much make sure that the plans are compliant, and then we're able to issue permits. Another good service is our third-party provider service, and it's probably our newest of all of those. And this program, it allows the developer to contract with an approved third-party provider for not just plan review, but also inspection services. And for this program, the developer works directly with the provider. And again, it's a newer program. I know we have a few people who have signed up for that, but it is available to you, and I hope to see more participation in that as well. Another efficiency is going to be our online permitting. As many of you know, we've switched over to an online permitting system. So now customers, I'm not going to say for everything, but it's less likely that they have to come into the permit center. They are now able to access and review their permits online, track the progress, submit revised plans. They're able to do all of that online. So I'm really proud of this, that we've moved to like an online permitting system. I know it's particularly helpful during a time such as this, like COVID, where we're unable, or we're all out of the office. And so in order to keep business moving forward, we're able to utilize that system. And then just internal process changes. We're always striving to improve our processes, always striving to do better. And I know one of our recent things that I encountered myself was an issue with like some escrow accounts. And so we recently updated the way that we do escrow accounts for IDPs in particular. So again, we're always striving to do better there. But now I just kind of want to hear from you guys. I know we have a poll here. And Travis, so just curious to know, what has been your experience with working with development services over the past year? And the answers are, I've experienced some improvements, so it's gotten a little better. Or unfortunately, if I've experienced new issues, maybe it's gotten worse for you. Or I haven't experienced any notable difference. It's been the same. So I'll give you guys a few minutes for that.
I'm not sure how many staff we have in this presentation, but we've had about 12 people participate so far. So maybe give it a little bit more and then we can share out those results.
The 12 responses might be just about the right number for non-staff, I would say.
Okay.
Oh, that's great. So 75% of the responses we received say that they have experienced some improvement. So that's great, because that's definitely what we want to hear. I also see some comments in the chat. Jessica says that our organization has greatly benefited from the online permitting portal. It brings a great value. Thanks, Jessica. I'd like to hear that. And then Josh also said the online permitting is good. The reviewers do not get notifications when new drawings are uploaded to the online permit center. That is something that we are trying to address. I don't know if you have more to say on that.
The permitting software that we got came with that sort of embedded workflow. So when you upload a drawing, there is no internal notification mechanism that tells a plans examiner that, hey, there's something in here for you to look at. Would you go check it out? So right now we are going through some testing to the 2020 version of EnerGov. And in the process, we have been trying to talk to them to make sure that the notification is in place. I believe it is in place now. When they first put it in place, something else happened. If you allow me, I'll just kind of share with you real quick. So when they put that process in place to notify plans examiners, they did something that really fouled up the payment system. And that would allow everybody and anybody to get a trade permit. Whereas the state has licensed contractors to take out permits. And so that was not workable for us. So we had to go back to them and say, hey, look, would you close the door to getting all these permits to everybody while we make it open for uploading all these documents? So they went through the process, they worked it out. I believe it is all ironed out now. We are in the final stages of testing the 2020 version of EnerGov. So you should be seeing some real changes in that front.
I think we're good to go to the next slide. Okay, so this one is just about development resources. So there are a number of resources that are available to you, whether it is scheduling a pre-development meeting, whether that's IDP or CCP, utilizing online maps or online resources, whether it's the city website or county websites, or maybe there is a development staff member that you prefer to reach out to that you find helpful. I am a resource, so anyone is always able to reach out to me directly about anything permitting or development services related. And so again, I think we have another poll here. Just kind of wanting to hear what resources do you consistently reference? So yeah, what resources do you consistently reference when performing development activity in Tulsa? And this is, you can, I guess it's multiple choice, so you can choose more than one. Do you schedule a pre-development meeting, a CCP meeting? You have a development services staff member that you choose to reach out to, or are you calling the Tulsa planning office staff, or utilizing the online resources that are available to you? And I'll give you guys a few moments. Okay, so it looks like 92% of you guys are utilizing online resources, maps, project booklets, city, county websites, engineering atlas, etc. So, okay. And then the next is calling Tulsa planning office staff. And then third, scheduling pre-development meetings. So, okay. Okay.
All right, from the last poll, it looks to me like the CCP is a resource that is less used, and perhaps we can promote the CCP a little bit more. But that also kind of depends on what part of the process, development process with City of Tulsa that you are involved in. And perhaps this group may not be as engaged with the CCP just because of the kind of work that you do. So anyways, as most of you know, when you submit an application or when you have a development, there are three different disciplines that will engage you. And in no particular order, we have classified this here on the slide as zoning, and then infrastructure and building. But depending on what you do, you may be engaged in infrastructure first, and that may be all you do. For example, John, you rarely, almost never get into building. Natalie, for example, may stay in zoning and not get into infrastructure, except where there might be easements and so on. So what is beneficial for today's program is just like City of Tulsa, where we have our plans examiners who are specialists in different areas. You are, in your own right, specialists in your different areas. And so whereas the development process is a series of integrated events, and our part in it is just one small aspect, we don't see the whole thing. And it is a little bit harder to appreciate getting it from start to finish, and hopefully seeing all this within a short time frame in the whole permitting process. But before we move on to these specific disciplines to talk about them, I think there's a poll question we can deploy and kind of get some idea of where we are on this. So what project components do you typically focus on first? Zoning, infrastructure, building design, legal aspects, and site layout. So I included legal aspects because in all three disciplines, almost always some legal issues do come up. So just kind of fill out your answers there and we'll see what the distribution is. Okay, it's kind of surprising that infrastructure came in at 0%. That's a little bit perplexing to me, but that's what it is. So with that, we're going to jump into the first discipline on our list here, which is zoning, and staff is going to take it away from there.
My name is Jeff Taylor. I am a plans examiner for City of Tulsa. I primarily do zoning reviews on the residential side. What I want to talk to you about a little bit was some of the items that we have in place for you to utilize, which you already know about the development meetings, the pre-development meetings. The zoning clearance only permit is a good tool as well. You can find out a lot of information about if your project or your planned project will fit that zoning district. All we look at is zoning on that one. So you can get all those aspects in zoning taken care of and then move forward with your project, you know, designing the building and everything else. The other item is the Tulsa zoning map, which will tell you exactly what zoning district you're in if you have the address. The next item is major street and highway plan. A lot of times I see that the major street and highway plan will show a greater right-of-way width for a particular project than what the existing plats show. So that means the city of Tulsa is planning on widening that street at some point in time. So you need to always check that major street and highway plan to see if your right-of-way width in front of your project is actually greater than what your plat indicates. Then you have the Tulsa zoning code, which is a very good tool, and it's online now in a PDF. You could download it. Some of the tips for getting through the process efficiently is a complete site plan. A lot of times we will not know the distance from the center of the street to the property line. That can be real crucial, and a lot of times we don't get that on our plans. The sidewalk and parking impact, you need to see if sidewalks are going to be required in front of your project. Make sure you have adequate parking, especially if you're doing a duplex or townhouse, something of that nature. The bulk and area requirements, you know, that's really good because you can find out if this is an existing non-conforming lot or not. And watch for those setbacks and encroachments into the setbacks or the easements. Those tend to pop up at the worst time in a project. So doing a little bit of research up front will go a long ways. I'm going to, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dana for the next slide. Oh, it's a residential site plan. And as you can see, it doesn't appear that we have a distance from the center of the street to the front property line. Sometimes your major street and highway plan will show that that right of way actually encroaches past the property line. So that will push your project further away from the front property line if that happens to you. Make sure that all the perimeter distances are on your property lines. Show us the setbacks from all sides of your project, front, rear, and both sides. Detached accessory buildings, they in the rear setback, they can be as close as 3 feet unless you have a utility easement at the back, and you will need to stay off of that utility easement. Other than that, north arrow, legal description, property address. That's a pretty good site plan. So if there's not anything else, I'll turn it over to Dana.
Jeff, we do have one question in the chat from Jessica about early feedback on drainage and sewer, similar to a zoning clearance. And this may be a question for kind of Dustin or Sandy, but someone wanted to respond to that. Is there an opportunity to get early feedback similar to a zoning clearance, like for drainage and sewer?
I'll be more than happy to address that later on when it comes to the WSD part of that. This is Dustin. So yeah, I'll be more than happy to address that a little later on after Jeff and Dana.
Great. Now it looks like we've got a hand raised at W Design.
Yes, I have a quick question on that right of way from the streets map. So what do we do if we get an LOD on that saying that our property line is, we don't have enough right of way dedicated from the central line to the property? So we got a couple of I'm dealing with right now. So I just wanted to see the process if we get that LOD item. I know we have to adjust the site plan based on that, but do we process that right of way dedication with the zoning department, or we have to go through the infrastructure?
The major street and highway plan will indicate what that minimum distance you will need from the center of the street, plus the required zoning front setback. So it has to equal both of those. And you'll have to look at the major street and highway plan on INCOG's website and put in the address of your project in order to find out if that property actually has a proposed right-of-way width greater than what is shown on most plats.
Okay.
So I think you were asking how you would dedicate that right away. Is that what the question was also?
Yes. So we find out the distance from the maps, and then we found out that okay, we don't have the enough distance from the central line. Then how do we address that? Of course, I can change move the building and change the side property line, but the dedication process has to go through during the permitting, right?
I guess it would depend on whether or not the right-of-way dedication was triggered by something that you've done with your development. I don't know that every time that you develop a site that right-of-way requirement is triggered. Obviously, from a zoning standpoint, they're going to want to make sure your setbacks and everything meet that ultimate right-of-way width. But if it is required, if you do trigger the dedication of the additional right-of-way, that would go through our separate instrument easement process in the Development Services Department.
Okay, yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, my name's Dana Box. I am a zoning plans reviewer with city. I'm probably one of the newer people in the department. Mostly work on commercial zoning with Chuck Lang. Also do a little bit with Jeff and Danny in the residential area. What I thought I'd do today is just kind of run briefly through some things that we find that get tripped up to get an LOD. As was mentioned earlier, the site plan, how important that is with everything marked on it, setbacks, that type of thing. We need to know, where the building is on the property and what those setbacks are. And then we want to also make sure that there's plenty of parking according to what type of use you have. Another thing is the landscape plan. The landscape plan is triggered when you have new construction or a 20% increase to the existing building. Some people say, why do I need a landscape plan with this little office building that I'm doing? Well, there are a lot of reasons other than beauty and improving air quality, but street trees and other trees help with the shading and some of the heat effect. And it's also a noise buffer for the street to the building itself. In the landscape plan too, there is a recommended and prohibited tree list, and it's updated frequently. Our latest prohibited and recommended trees is September 2020. So we found before that somebody submits a site plan and a landscape plan, everything looks perfect, except they use the wrong type of trees. So be sure and access that tree and landscape plan or the prohibited trees. It's a very helpful guide. The landscape plan is always going to be in effect. There are very few exceptions to that. There's if you have an ag type use or public space or park, that will not require. Also, if you have to reconstruct a building due to fire, it would not be required then. Let's see, parking, as was mentioned too. The ratios for the parking in commercial are according to what type of use. So depending on what type of use you have, they will give you a ratio per 1,000 square feet. So we can figure out how many parking spaces you need for that type of use through the parking element there. We have also incorporated a bicycle parking as part of our review. We're trying to make Tulsa a more walkable and bicycle friendly city. And so we have started including the bicycle parking as one of the aspects that's required on the zoning review. And the last thing would be like the lighting plan. You may or may not need a lighting plan with your project, but if you do not have a lighting plan, please indicate that on your plans themselves. Otherwise, we will look for the photo plan, the photometric plan, or a fixture height plan. And that could be something that if you do not indicate if it's there, then we may, the zoning review may be halted until we can find out if you have a lighting plan. I think that's really it. Most people are pretty good about getting everything. I'd say the site plan is the number one requirement. We want to make sure that that's included in all your submissions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dustin Wright. As title up there, private infrastructure, WSD. What I'd like to kind of emphasize on that is the WSD of a building permit. We're looking at the water, sewer, and drainage. And it's as simple as it sounds, water, sewer, drainage. I mean, we focus from the ground down. I would like to share a little story for you, though. As I see the participants over here, I get a lot of people who come in and they've already bought a site. Say they bought a 5-acre site. They've already ordered a building package, and they're there. I want to get an earth change permit. Well, the cool thing for me is I've been with the city for about 20 years. I started out in the zoning department, doing plans review. I've worked over here, so I've experienced quite a few things with the development side of things and kind of how they all tie together. With that said, I can have a person come in, and by the time I'm done with them, you talk about a glazed look on their face. Once I talk about zoning, plating, you've got to do an extension for the sewer. Have you talked about detention yet? I've got some worn out people. So with that said, I'm one of your all's best salesmen out here to get some of you developers out here. But I just want to throw this in with these 3 things: water, sewer, drainage. They can wreak havoc on a building permit timeline if not addressed early in the development process. And as Jessica Shelton has a question here that we have several platted parcels where we'd like to get an early feedback on drainage and sewer. Is there an application for that? Well, we do have a watershed permit, which we can actually look at that. But I'll be honest with you, the best thing to do is if you can address the issues. It's like Ewan said, we have specialists on our team. We have water specialists, sewer specialists, drainage specialists, zoning specialists. It's really, I'm afraid to say we're still old school in that, and it's really best to address those things to that person. Does a zoning clearance permit application review infrastructure? And the answer is no, it does not. But you also say that can be found out from the engineering atlases. So once again, if you find out you have a question about water or sewer, it's best to reach out to the city staff. And that's part of our job, to be here to address those questions. Going into the slide here, after you guys did the poll that 92% of you are utilizing online, I really don't want to go into much detail on the available resources, but I would like to emphasize the engineering atlas. That's whenever somebody comes in and they have a site, the 2 things I do: I pull up an engineering atlas and I want to know where the water's at, the sewer's at, and any storm sewer. And the second thing I do is I want to pull up a floodplain map to see if that property is in the floodplain. Because on the engineering atlas, as you see on the screen there, it has a lot of information there. I can tell if I can look at a piece of property and see if a water line's available. I can see the size of that water line. I can also see if there's fire hydrants in there. Same thing with sewer. I can see where it's located at. I can see the size of it. There's manhole locations on there. There's depth of manholes. These are all valuable tools whenever you're coming to develop. Tulsa County plats, for example, we utilize that to pull up our easements for these projects. And we also verify right away with that. So all these tools here, it's the same tools city staff utilizes. We've also got our ordinances online, and we've got the stormwater criteria manual online. And I really want to focus on the criteria manual. I don't know if you guys are familiar on how to get to that, but it's very simple. cityofTulsa.org. You go to our development services page. You can go to infrastructure development, and you can access the criteria manual. One of the important things to address with the criteria manual is these infill projects. Believe it or not, our most complicated projects are infill projects, and drainage is one of the major concerns with that. And just to kind of throw a little fun fact at you, the city of Tulsa participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. With our participation in regulations, citizens receive up to a 40% discount on flood insurance within the FEMA floodplain, and a 10% reduction in flood insurance for all citizens within the city limits. With that said, the National Flood Insurance tracks all floodplain claims. Any kind of flood, they track that. And did you know the city of Tulsa's most flood claims are not actually located in a floodplain? And what we've come to find out, it's really bad construction habits. We've got new houses being built slab on grade at grade. So this criteria manual has really took a next step in trying to help the homeowner and the developer and the contractor to help build a better, safer house from water damage. I mean, when we have a house being built and you've got the street 5 foot above the finished floor elevation, and this house is built right on grade, you're going to have issues. So we're trying to, the criteria manuals actually kind of went there to help address some of those issues. Tips for getting through the process efficiently. I have to emphasize research your site. Once again, I'm pretty fortunate having been here long enough to understand how your subdivision regulations and zoning actually triggers some things that affect my review, the WS Water Sewer Drainage Review. So water availability, once again, when I say research your site, I'm still going back to these same things, available resources that we've got listed. We've got the engineering map, the engineering atlas, the floodplain maps, and the county plats. So when I look at a site, water availability, I'm also looking at the size of it, the location of it, and other things you need to consider is the use of the building and the building code and the fire code. A lot of the times when a project comes into our office, the actual building code will actually dictate that a new fire hydrant needs to be installed. Some of these new processes, a loop fire system or a loop system has to be installed, and then we have to address the adequate pressure. So you have to actually hire someone to actually look at that. Sewer, same thing. I'm looking at location, size of sewer. Whenever you look at that green line on the map, look at the size of it. Make sure it's 12 inches or less. Same thing with the water line. When it goes over 12 inches, this can trigger potentially main extensions. Also look at the net on those sewers. Make sure it's not a force main. All these things are somewhat highlighted on there. It's just a matter of kind of paying attention to that. Another issue we run into is you may have sewer to the lot, but your lot's in a hole. How do you get up to that sewer? You need to look at the manhole depths, and that information is available online. Also, drainage. The contours, they're available online. That's what we look at too. How does that water convey across my lot? These are things you need to consider. How will the construction change the previous flow patterns? Am I at the bottom of a hill or am I at the top of the hill? And these apply to actual residential homes and commercial developments. Now, commercial gets a little more complicated whenever you have to determine where you're at in the drainage basin, and is detention required? Or can you pay fees in lieu of detention? So to throw that out, think of a 2-acre commercial lot. Let's say it's 70% developed. If you do not provide detention, you're allowed to pay fees in lieu of. You're looking at a $45,000 in fees in lieu of detention. That's something you need to know about. Need to be up front. Let's see. I'm bouncing back over to questions. Did you see our engineering atlas being offered online anytime soon? Well, we actually have that online, but it's not the. Well, this is from Michelle. Michelle, I'll have to let Sandy address that one there. The current is through the Atlas Grid PDFs, which are not easy to use. So, Michelle, to address that question, the actual engineering atlas we have online that's available to the public, they have what they call a layered view, where it actually pulls in the same information that we have on the back office. It's very cluttered. So you can actually break that out by individual sheets, but I feel that we have that information out there. Jessica Shelton, to clarify, if I want a non-committal way prior to submitting for permit to find out whether we need address, sewer, or drainage on an already platted lot, I should just email that specific reviewer. So I really think that's the best way to actually address that. And if Sandy, when we get to yours, if you feel have some more to enlighten on that, please help me out. But we need specialists, so I would think that would be the way to go. So I want to focus a little bit on floodplain as well. Because of a timing issue, if floodplain's on the property, I don't want you guys to freak out, but guess what? You're going to have to hire a surveyor. Sometimes we need a civil engineer. So these are time constraints, so things you need to consider. We have the maps out there. So we need to understand, how is your project affecting the floodplain? These are things you need to consider. Also, right-of-way and easements. One of the things we look at is your construction going to encroach into an easement? If it does, we highly recommend that you guys relocate your infrastructure or your structure outside of the easement. And if you choose to encroach in that easement, there is a process you have to go through. One of the major things too is to communicate. All plans have to match. Architectural site plans are done by architects. Then we have a landscape plan. Then we may have IDP plans. We may have civil plans. A lot of the times we'll have out-of-date plans from disciplines. What I mean by that is you can apply for a building permit and we'll have a site plan. You're also going through the IDP plan. And a lot of the times those things actually change. The design can affect the building plan. So that's one of the reasons why we have to have open communication with everybody and understand the process. And then that leads into this domino effect. It's pretty simple. I have water and sewer and stormwater flows downhill. What could possibly hold up my building permit review? Fortunately, with the city of Tulsa, you can apply for a building permit at any time in the development process. The water sewer drainage is highly dependent on the statuses of the other development processes that are associated with this. It's like a checks and balance. One of the things that we ensure is the IDP permit. If you've got public infrastructure that's a part of your overall development, our WSD review is held up until those IDP plans are actually approved and that copy has been submitted with the building permit set. Now, this is something we do to actually ensure that the plans are actually up to date and match the building plan set. Other things that can affect the review is a plat. If you have a plat out there that's pending, we need to know where the easements are that are associated with that plat and your right-of-way dedication. So that's one of the things we look at and try to make sure everything matches up with what's being proposed on the building permit side and the plat side. Easements is another thing. If you have something if you have infrastructure that requires an easement, or if you're trying to encroach an easement, we have to verify that all these things are actually in process. I keep trying to look at this and I'm looking at my questions. I'll get to the questions here in just a second. And then once we go into floodplain, development in the floodplain, many of these projects require a detailed engineered study. And when we have to deal with FEMA, I mean, we're looking at FEMA being involved for clomers and lomers, and they actually have an estimated time review. I mean, you're looking at an engineer has to prepare something, submit it to FEMA, pay their review fee, and wait on their time review. We also verify when projects encroach in the U.S. Corps of Engineers. That's another process that we need to make sure that's actually going through and getting reviewed and approved as part of our process. So what I want to emphasize is just this process, it's checks and balances. I mean, the domino effect is real. It can affect anything from a residential house to commercial development. But know where your project stands in the development process, and that includes zoning, platting, infrastructure, and floodplain. Let's see here. Can you comment on how long they should plan for a FEMA floodplain change? So that's a risky question. One is you got to prepare for your engineer to actually design those plans. And the complication of that is really up to the engineer. Next is the FEMA process. The FEMA process, they have a minimum 3-month review period to actually get it in and look at it. And then they can take up to 3 months to look at your comments. After they make comments, you respond back, they have another 3 months. I mean, this is a lengthy time process and usually takes about 9 months to get through. I mean, just throwing that out. And it's very expensive. I think the last time it's like $6,000, $6,000 for just to make the application. And that's not counting your engineer fees.
That's just for the clomer.
Yeah, for the clomer.
And then when you file the loamer, you get to pay again.
Yeah. So, but how to allow enough time for that? It's really, I mean, I'm glad you asked that question. It's something you got to put in.
I would just assume a year and hope you get done in 9 months.
Right. So my last little bullet here is timing. You never can start too early. You can apply for a building at any time, but just remember the building permit review It deals with architectural, it deals with zoning, it deals with water, sewer, and drainage. All these things have to be aligned. All the I's have to be dotted, T's crossed for us to get to that end building permit. So research your property, understand how the zoning affects your plating, lot splits, your public infrastructure, and the fire code and the building codes. I mean, just understand how that all ties in together. And one of our best tools for the development community is our pre-development meeting. That's one of the best ways to pull all these people into one room, have an open discussion, and address things. And I'd like to turn it over to Sandy, unless there's any other questions. How to access Tulsa County plats. I can type that in there in just a minute.
All right, thanks, Dustin. Public infrastructure. Dustin mentioned water, sewer, drainage. So you've got those three components. They're either going to be private or public. Dustin covers the private side, and I'm covering the public side. So one thing to know about public infrastructure, one thing to know about, I guess, about the IDP process is it's public infrastructure that's being built by the developer that will be donated to the city, that's required to be extended to make the project work. Minimize that. As far as available resources, I was fortunate enough to put off developing my slide until Dustin was done. So I stole most of his because most of the resources are the same. The Atlas, floodplain maps, plats, ordinances, criteria manual. The only things that, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same information that's out there. We've got our IDP manual online that makes an attempt to sort of summarize every step in the IDP process. It's kind of we're constantly tweaking that thing to make it more user-friendly. So any suggestions that anybody has are more than welcome, but it's a summary of what our process is. We use the city standard specs and details because your building infrastructure that will be donated to the city has to be up to our standards and specifications. And then, of course, as Dustin mentioned, the IDP pre-development meetings. We had 2 of them today, as a matter of fact, and they are a very valuable tool. It's a great chance for everybody to have the reviewers in the same room to talk about the different aspects of the project from a public infrastructure standpoint. Tips for getting through the process efficiently, again, very similar to what Dustin said. I'll just reiterate, research your site. That's the most important thing you can do. I would say, I think, go back here. Jessica Shelton's question was about reaching out to specific reviewers on finding out whether we need to address sewer or drainage on an already platted lot. I would say instead of reaching out to a specific reviewer, your best bet is to actually get an engineer involved who understands what the requirements of the city of Tulsa are with respect to connections and things like that. We're definitely here for support, but we do not design sites. So I hope that is a little bit of clarification for that question. As Dustin said, communication between the developer, the architect, the engineer, and city staff. A lot of these projects have a lot of moving parts. They have building permits that are in process. They have plats that are in process. IDP plans, there might be license agreements, easements by separate instrument. And as Dustin kind of alluded to, sometimes the architectural plans and the civil plans can start to drift apart from where they originally were based on changes that happen because the processes are separate. So sometimes conflicts occur when we get to the end of projects and we find those kinds of inconsistencies. So lots of communication. One thing that I think our department does well is that for the most part, you can reach out to reviewers and contact them directly, whether it's in the building department or in the IDP group, WSD group, zoning. All of us are pretty available. And so I think that's a pretty neat thing that should be definitely taken advantage of. If you get review comments that you're not sure about, reach out and don't get frustrated on them. The development domino effect is definitely, as Dustin said, real. The next slide kind of illustrates that, but we'll get to that in a minute. And as Dustin said, timing. Do not wait to enter the processes. I guess no matter what the process is, it has a certain timeline built into it. We have some of our processes, such as easements and plats, have to be approved by city council or signed by the mayor. Well, those folks do those things on a schedule that isn't going to change. The council meets when they meet, and the mayor signs things when he signs things. So you don't want to find out late that you've got everything done, and now you're just waiting on those processes to take place. It's not a good place to be. The worst thing is if somebody comes to me and says, well, I didn't turn in my license agreement application. I wasn't going to do that until I had approval of the site plan or approval of my IDP plans, or I didn't want to enter the building permit process until my IDP plans were done. I think, in my opinion, getting a comment that says, these plans can't be approved until the IDP plans are approved, or but still getting the rest of the review done and started and completed on building permits is that's the place you want to be. Get that comment, how to address that comment. Your IDP plans will be approved at some point. You'll be able to check that one off, but get the rest of the comments. Allow somebody else to take a look at it and tell you what the zoning problems are, or whatever it is. That's all I can think of on that one. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. This slide is just kind of like some of the things that were mentioned that are involved in so many projects: elevation certificates, IDP plans, lot line adjustments. All of these different things can come up at different points, which is why you want to get into the review process for your building permit and your IDPs early. You might not have thought that you had to do a CLOM or LOMR, but the sooner you find out that you need to do that, the better off you're going to be. Oftentimes, the design has to change because of comments in a way that you suddenly realize that you have offsite easements to get. Easement process is a lengthy process, and you want to enter that as early as possible. So these are just some of the processes that in and of themselves, each of these is doable. I think I can imagine that being a developer, I would think that I could see frustration because there seem to be so many processes, but each of them has a purpose, and anything that we can streamline, we obviously would like to. None of us likes to be drugged through any of these processes if we don't have to, but they all have a purpose. So I'm going to go back up. Looks like there's some things. There's clearly a disconnect. How can we move towards a cohesive review process? It's a good question. I don't know. I think one of the reasons it appears that there are so many different processes is because the different aspects of the different projects not all projects include all of these aspects. And I don't know, Ewan, if you want to weigh in on this, the question about a cohesive review process. I'm not sure that I mean, architectural plans and building permits and zoning and all of those have nothing to do, well, are a completely different discipline than infrastructure and those kinds of things. And the city is not set up to have a project manager for projects. I guess that would be a different approach, is if when a project came in, it had project managers assigned to it that would do all the different things. But I, based on my experience, I don't think that would be very efficient either. I think that would have its own issues. But I'm certainly open to ideas on ways to make it feel like there's a more cohesive process. I also think that me babbling about all of these different things probably makes it make it sound more confusing than it really is. Michelle asked, would you be willing to suggest a pre-development for non-committal discussion? I'm not, I see, that's to me. Shouldn't have read that out loud.
Sandy, this is
yes.
Ewan. Kind of jumping into your comment on that one. Basically, jurisdictions across the country have two basic approaches to permitting services. One is to have project managers to walk projects through. And the other aspect is you submit the application and staff pick it up and look. In some cases, you might have a combination, but I want to say that a project manager approach is very staff intensive. You're going to have a lot of people in your department to manage each project. So with current budget and staffing issues, I don't think that's a very doable project, but certainly in some of the big projects that we do have here in Tulsa, and that are unique. Some of these are smaller projects, but they are really unique in some aspects. We do assign staff to those projects. So we have a combination of that. So getting back to Josh's comment about the disconnect between land and building, and I think Josh, you were trying to elaborate or clarify that a little bit. You basically say the land size seems to continue to be like too long and difficult a process, whereas the building is trying to be helpful and streamlined. In the case of infill development, I agree that land size sometimes can be very challenging, just simply because of you being hemmed in with surrounding infrastructure. So you may have to upgrade a storm pipe that's been in the ground for about the last 20 or 30 years. And to go through the process might involve a little bit more groups with engineering services, for example. Sometimes you want to change a zoning to fit a particular development plan. Like for example, those may be single family lots and you want to change that to a multi-family lot. A greenfield site is where you have no neighbors who's going to show up to object to zone changes, mostly. But in an infill, you have neighbors all around you who have different ideas on what your development can impact their properties. And so you have to go and deal with a lot of these issues. And so whether we like it or not, it does show itself into a very lengthy process. Some of these are just inherent in the nature of that project, development project. It is just inherent in the site location that you have. it is inherent in the neighborhood that you're working in. So I don't know if we have a ready answer to present as a one glove that fits all sizes. I think it is unique in every situation, but definitely I think our team here, Sandy's group, Michael Link's group over infrastructure development, they try to identify those development obstacles in a pre-development meeting. So anyway, Sandy, that's my take on it. If you want to add to it, jump right in. But we're going to find different ways to kind of mitigate some of the challenges that you have. One of which is landscaping in right-of-way, for example. Right now, landscaping right-of-way, you have two different tree lists. You have a different group that actually issues the permit for landscaping right-of-way. And then it comes back to our zoning group here in development services to kind of look at it. So that's one of those where I think it is common to all of you as far as a challenge, and we're trying to streamline the process. So what I'm going to say is that if we can identify some common issues, then we'll talk about it. John, go ahead.
I would like to just say, like, I don't think that a lot of these things actually, I mean, compared to other cities, it doesn't take any longer to get rezoning done in Tulsa. It doesn't take any longer to get plating done in Tulsa. It's all that stuff is very streamlined. If you have a complex project in the middle of a downtown or something, then I don't know. I haven't experienced those things going smoothly anywhere. There's just, you know, easements that have been in place for 20, 50, 80 years. And, you know, the real estate law behind abandoning easements is it is what it is. It just takes some time. So there's some of that. I want to reiterate, like, we actually are a very easy place to develop. There's just some minor kinks that we need to fix in the process to make it even easier, to make it even more lucrative. If you guys are having problems developing in Tulsa, contact your local Synergy representative.
Right. Yeah, I think, John, you brought up some points about different reviews that are more difficult. And I just wanted to, I guess one thing I wanted to underscore on that is that storm by nature is a little bit trickier. It's harder, and I understand. I think
I don't know that it's harder elsewhere. It's harder based on our review system here. I'll you know, I can agree with a lot of things, but the storm review in the city of Tulsa right now for IDP, if you go through a specific reviewer, is the biggest pain and most ridiculous process that I've ever seen. And that's a fact. Like, it just, there's no consistency to a certain reviewer's reviews. And there's new things that pop up every time. If there was some bit of consistency, if someone handed me a drainage report and said, this is the drainage report, match this thing, meet these calcs, make sure to check all these boxes, that's easy. The problem is we don't know what those criteria are every time we submit something.
So the notes that I've written down from this meeting include that we need to get better about being consistently communicating all of the comments on the first round of comments. And I think this kind of falls into that to some extent. Clearly communicate when we review things the first time through all of our expectations. And that's definitely something we can work on across the board. We can focus on it with our storm review specifically. And it is something that, like I said, we can work on that. And I do believe that that is a fair criticism. I guess we'll just have to have continued discussions about our storm review on synergy projects and the challenges that we've had, and hopefully we'll continue to move in the right direction and get to where we need to be with that. But I will also say that I think that this is the kind of discussion that we need to have. We need to understand where your frustrations are and continue to focus on making those situations better. I will say that I believe that drainage reports and detention calculations and clomers and lomers and all of the things that go into many of the drainage issues don't lend themselves to a cookie cutter formula that that fits all projects. I do think it is more difficult than water or sanitary sewer or transportation. Usually the answer is not a straight line, but I hear what you're saying, and we will continue to work on that. Real quick, I want to get to Tim had a question about the plating and IDP process is taking too long. And owners getting frustrated while the ball is in the city's court. Difficult to anticipate the critical path in these processes. I can't disagree with I'm sure owners are frustrated when processes take a long time. What we've found out, or one of the things that we've done when we've kind of gone back and looked at processes that took a long time and projects that took a long time, is we've often found out that it was that developers themselves were not told the complete story by their consultants. Oftentimes there was a lot of back and forth with the city of Tulsa, and the review times were reasonable, but the time it took to get the project done was long because of the back and forth with the with consultants and the city of Tulsa that the owner never really saw. And so we've tried to implement where we actually include the developer and the owner in our communications more often, at least in the IDP group, and try to, again, just in the interest of full disclosure for everybody so that everybody can be privy to all of the discussions that are going on any given project. So, Tim, I don't know if you have specific areas that you've seen where reviews actually take too long. I guess I focus on the review times, and we do focus on those and try to.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tim.
You know, I'm kind of more of a big picture architect. I really kind of work on the project schedules and make sure the team is in place. And I do have a long talk with, you know, if this is going to be a platted site or an IDP site, that's going to cause a complexity. And I talk to civil engineers and I say, how fast do you think this is going to take to plat it and to IDP it? And usually they say somewhere, I ask, can you do it in 6 months? And they say, no, but I could probably do it in 8 months or something like that. And, you know, we have meetings with the owners, and a lot of the times, you know, the civil engineer says, you know, I'm probably spending 2 months of that 8-month process working on it. And the city is probably spending the remainder 6 months. It's on their court. And I don't understand that. But when they say that, I'm somewhat confused as to what is it that's taking so long and why? And what do I need to tell the owner? You know, there's a submittal of drawings, and then my civil engineer tells me, well, we've submitted it for review and now it's in review, and then it comes back with comments and they got to review for the comments, and they can turn their comments around quick, but it's another 4-week review or something like that. And I'm trying to figure that out, and I'm trying to get that process communicated better. And basically, I mean, I can put 8 months on my schedule, but why do I need to put 8 months on my schedule?
No, that's fair. Go ahead, John.
We have done some massive projects and have never experienced the city being in review for 6 months of an 8-month process. I feel like whoever that civil engineer is you know, maybe too busy to work on the project at the time, or setting it aside. I have no idea what's going on,
Well,
but we've done some massive projects that has never happened on.
Yeah, and these are complicated. I mean, it's midtown residential lots being transferred, you know, combined lots of vacating alleys, vacating easements, having to redo sanitary sewer, all of those things, and I can understand all that. But when my civil engineer turns in the application and he tells me we're still 6 months away from getting permission, I don't understand.
Okay, well, okay, maybe, John, I appreciate you pointing out our review times are not quite that long, but I think maybe it's a little bit of smushing together some different processes. When you have to close an easement, okay, now you're talking about a process that has some built-in review times. I read this as the IDP review times, and our target is to do it in 10 working days or less. And sometimes we go over that, but we're somewhere in the 80 percentile on that. When you're talking about something like closing an easement, that has a built-in from the application day, it has 30 days that it goes out to all of the utilities and all the people who have an interest in that particular easement, and they'll come back and that's the amount of time that they have just to tell you their initial reaction to closing the easement and all of the requirements. I don't want to get bogged down in that particular process, but to this slide, to the point of the slide that's in front of you, you've now entered another, and that's not even listed on here, but you've now entered another process that is going to domino your length of time that it takes to get approved, for sure. So it's a good illustration to me about just how these somewhat simple processes can get complicated pretty quickly when you start piling these things on top of each other. Yes, it would be great to speed up that particular process. And I think drilling down into each one of these processes and figuring out why they take so long, or why they take as long as they do, whatever that length is something that we're very aware of and we try to do. But we can only control so many of them. So
it's worth noting as well that that easement process includes a second step that requires district court to vacate that easement entirely. I mean, that's going to be at the discretion of the court and can definitely add some time to any sort of timeline you're going through if they're trying to fully vacate that easement or that right of way.
Right.
I think the one thing I'm trying to get out of this is all of these little issues, the easement. One of those is the killer on the schedule. And I'm trying to communicate before this process starts to the owner why it's going to take this long. And I can never come up with the answer.
No, and that makes sense. I understand that. And you, Tim, and Josh is basically saying kind of a similar thing, I think, on here, the additional back and forth, all the processes. If one could have a checklist for every process the city has, maybe at the beginning of their project, and check off the ones that need to be done, I think that would give you a really good idea of how long your project is going to take. I think you'd have a much better idea of you know, what your critical paths are and things like that. But it would be an extensive list of different processes, and you'd have to really know. Well, it all goes back to what that slide said about, you know, researching your site. Are we going to have to close easements? Are we going to have to donate additional right of way? Do we have a clome or loamer? If you know all of those things, then each of them can be explained. So perhaps for all the city folks that are listening, maybe we can work on some sort of a project handout checklist that lists every single one of our processes, and you know, that might be a useful tool for somebody to have at the beginning of their project, to know.
And you know, the big driver of this is, and I know we have lots of developers here, is developers approach these projects in a time frame and say, you know, they come to me and ask, you know, I have a potential project and I need to get this project online in, 16 months or 1 year so I can start getting my money back on it. And so that's what, it's difficult to put an 8-month review process in when they don't have that much time in their schedule for their business plan.
Well, again, that's true. I totally understand that. I just want to be careful with the word review. It's not a review process that's taking that long. It's the fact that there's all these other issues with that particular site. I mean, if you have to close an easement, if you have a loamer floamer, if you have floodplain, if you have license agreements, things that you want to do out in the right of way that require these things, those are part of the process. That site maybe isn't the one that's going to be ready in a year. I think that's part of the determination that has to be made.
I think what would be helpful is when we do have an easement or something like this that's being closed, because we've run into this a couple times, if there was some ability for once it gets in process, it's done. We all know that, like, it's okay, it's in process, it's going to work its way through the meat grinder that is the bureaucracy of closing an easement. So once it gets there, we know it's going to happen. What would be nice is if developers and everybody had some opportunity to just go at risk at that point. I mean, we talk to clients every day that are like, well, can I go at risk on this? And I think that's the kind of thing that might help these easement issues, is if we could just get started, because 2 months of site work and maybe some foundations and whatever, it goes a long way. Why, instead of just sitting there waiting for something to get through district court. So
I think that's a good point. And I believe, John, you've probably experienced this, and probably most of you have. I think our department, development services in general, is always listening to those kinds of requests, and we entertain them as much as possible. And we learn some things, and I think we try to accommodate that as much as possible with things like the earth change permit and foundation permits and things like that. So I'm going to let somebody else jump in. I think I've talked way too much here.
I think over the years, we have had different projects issued permits at risk. And sometimes it would depend on what the issue really is, because there might be a legal aspect to it that keeps us from issuing at-risk permit. For example, the zoning code may say that you got to have the plat completed before we can issue a permit. So in a case like this, it's really kind of like a hard bound into the process that you have to finish those platting process. Where we can flex a little bit, we certainly did over the years, and we have issued those at-risk permits. Sometimes it might be just a matter of seeing some of the risks involved. So John, in your case, like a couple of big projects that you have done with us over the years, where there were some modifications to a site detention or floodplain issue or the boundaries of floodplain. I think Michael Lang and Sandy's group, they jumped in there and said, yeah, we can go ahead and issue this phase of the permit for you. So it really kind of depends. So Tim, back to a question about some of the processes. I think Sandy is on point there. The review itself might not be difficult to estimate a time frame, but I think your frustration might be how long is some of these embedded processes where you have a time to go through. Like how long is the court going to come to your case and say, yeah, we are going to vacate this easement and so on. I think that is a part that you may not know about, which on our side, we really couldn't help you too much either, because it is in the court's hands. If we have a better crystal ball to tell you what the time frame is, we are happy to share with you. But I think the points that you raised, as well as what John had thrown in for us, worth considering, and we will definitely regroup and see where we can shorten some of the time frame and entertain some of those at-risk permits a little bit more daringly, if I would say.
I agree. I appreciate it's more than a review process. I mean, personally, I always blame the legal department for everything. So it's not any of the reviewer's fault, but it just seems like there's got to be some way to find out where we're going to have the problem early on, where we need to put our time in early in the process that we can work through. And maybe some of these processes could be run simultaneously so that we can complete them all at once. If it's just a matter of getting the paperwork filed, how can we keep moving knowing that the paperwork will eventually be filed? That's kind of the things I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, point taken, Tim. We'll get with you. Before we have people start dropping off, we are getting close to 5 o'clock. Let's jump into building.
All right, thanks, Ewan. My name is Danny Whiteman, and I do the residential building reviews. And so a lot of what we've talked about as far as getting through the process efficiently and the available resources has already been brought up, so I won't spend a lot of time there. But we do have online our residential building permit process, which gives you guides on what items may be required based on your application type. So those are available online. Let's see, can we go to the next slide? Something that I wanted to talk about was just a common confusion that comes up sometimes, and that has to do with the differences between townhouses, apartments, and duplexes, because the building code language and the zoning code language doesn't always line up exactly. So we have our definition here from the building code of what a townhouse is. So it's basically a single family unit. There's 3 or more attached units. Each unit extends from the foundation to the roof, and each unit also has a yard or a public way on not less than 2 sides. So this fits the definition of a townhouse, and those were reviewed according to the residential code. Something that to point out here, a townhouse in the building code may not necessarily be a townhouse in the zoning code. So for instance, townhouses on one lot would be viewed as apartments/condos according to the zoning code, but townhouses according to the building code. So the building code doesn't care whether the townhouses are on separate lots or on one lot. For the zoning code to be a townhouse in the zoning code to meet that use definition, they each have to be on their own individual lot. And so townhouses, they require a fire sprinkler system. A duplex, just a 2-family dwelling unit separated by common wall or floor. These can be on top or side by side. A duplex does not require a sprinkler system, and that's a city ordinance that modifies that in the IRC. And of course, if we have an apartment that doesn't meet the definition of a townhouse or a duplex, then that gets reviewed under the IBC for commercial buildings. So another one that comes up commonly. So when we do townhouses, duplexes, each unit requires a separate permit. So that happens a lot. One townhouse building with 5 units, then you have to have a permit for each unit in that townhouse. And so I went through that quickly. I know we're a little short on time, but I was going to see if there were any questions, any comments on that.
Any final thoughts? I know we pushed it over a little, but I think this was really good discussion. So thank you for hanging out with us. Any other final comments?
I just want to say real quick, Tim, Josh, anybody out there, if you have any thoughts about how other cities handle things like easement closures more quickly, or all of those kinds of things that we're talking about getting stuck on here at the city. Let's talk about it. We're definitely always looking to make things go more quickly and be less painful for everybody involved.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thanks our friends at Development Services and everyone that works in development in the city of Tulsa. We appreciate all you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.